Speed and Nguyen's Deep Dive podcast is an official podcast made by Speed and Nguyen with the voice made from Google's Notebook LM. Do not reproduce our podcast without permissions from the owner. Welcome to the Speed and Nguyen's Deep Dive podcast. So today we are looking at something that is just, well, it's pretty mind-bending.
It really is. I mean, the stack of research we're going through today it's profound and honestly a bit chilling.
Yeah, intense is definitely the word for it. But before we really jump in, just a quick note for you listening. Our sources today are pretty heavy. We've got human rights reports from the U.S. Korea Institute, some undercover investigations by Daily NK, and this really detailed, highly technical cybersecurity research from ERNW.
Right. And it's worth mentioning that these documents contain some heavily charged accounts about, state control and human rights abuses.
Exactly. And we want to be super clear right at the top that we aren't here to take political sides or endorse specific viewpoints. Our goal is strictly to impartially unpack the information and the technological realities presented in this source material, just so you can understand what is actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, that's a really important framing because the technology we're discussing today it's not what you'd expect.
Not at all. I mean, imagine you buy a brand new smartphone, right? You turn it on, try to text a friend a harmless joke using some local slang, and the phone literally physically rewrites your text right before your eyes.
And then it flashes a permanent warning on your screen that you've just committed a crime.
Right. It's wild. So today's mission is looking at these physical devices that have been smuggled out of North Korea. We want to understand how modern technology, which, is the very thing we usually assume, brings global connection. How it's been totally inverted into this ultimate instrument for state surveillance and mind control.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because
Yeah.
to really understand the depth of this manipulation, we have to look past the physical casing.
Yeah, because if you were to hold one of these smuggled devices, your brain would immediately just categorize it as a normal phone or tablet.
Like it just looks like an Android.
Exactly. The ERNW research details a few specific models. So you have this budget-friendly phone called the Han 701. Then there's a flagship phone, the Samsung 8, which actually translates to 3 huge stars, which is a very deliberate flex against South Korea's Samsung.
Oh, wow, I didn't even catch that. 3 huge stars versus 3 stars. That's petty. It really is. And then there's a tablet known as the Woolum. And, on the surface, they are built on forked versions of the standard Android operating system. But that familiarity is a total trap. It's a highly curated facade.
And I really want to dig into that facade, specifically the hardware modifications, because from what I read, they aren't just taking an Android phone and hiding the Wi-Fi settings menu, right? They are physically crippling these devices at the manufacturing level.
They are, yeah. Take the Woolum tablet, for example. The researchers found that the motherboard literally lacks the physical chips for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth.
Wait, they physically remove them?
They don't even install them. It's not just disabled in the software. The hardware simply does not exist inside the casing.
I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of a user here. Why go through the trouble of physically removing the chips? I mean, if there's no global internet in the country anyway, what is the state so afraid of?
Well, they are absolutely terrified of peer-to-peer networks.
Right.
Yeah, because if those devices had standard Bluetooth or Wi-Fi chips, citizens could theoretically create ad hoc mesh networks. Like, you could just pass a file from your tablet to your neighbor's tablet through an apartment wall without ever touching a cell tower.
Oh, wow. So no centralized control.
Exactly. By physically removing the networking hardware, the state forces all digital communication through these very specific physical bottlenecks that they own and monitor.
So, okay, if you actually want to connect to something, what do you even do?
You have to go out and purchase a separate state-approved USB dongle. And even then, you're obviously not accessing the global internet.
Right. Definitely no Wikipedia or YouTube.
No, definitely not. You're connecting to a tightly controlled domestic intranet or a highly restricted public Wi-Fi network that's called Mirai. And the thing is, Mirai doesn't even look like a normal Wi-Fi network.
How so?
The SSAD broadcasts, like the network names, they look like military serial numbers. It's something like PYY 1026 MIA 000007.
Wow. It just sounds incredibly clinical. And, this level of control totally extends to how you actually get software onto the device, too. Because if you're listening to this, just think about the apps on your phone right now. You tap an icon, you hit download, you're done.
Right. It takes 5 seconds.
Yeah. But according to the undercover research, a North Korean citizen cannot do that. To install an app, they literally have to physically travel to a brick-and-mortar government store.
The logistics of that are just fascinating when you really break down the mechanism. So the citizen hands their device over the counter, a state official takes it, plugs the phone into a specialized terminal, authorizes the download, and then injects the back-end data required for that specific app to function.
So you can't just like grab an APK installation file from a buddy and sideload it.
No, not at all. The operating system is explicitly programmed to reject any application that doesn't carry the cryptographic signature of that exact physical terminal in the government store.
It's just so locked down. And the apps themselves they're this surreal mix of heavy state propaganda and just blatant pirated ripoffs of Western media.
Yeah, the ripoffs are pretty wild.
They really are. The sources highlight one where there's this documentary about the Arsenal Football Club that was seemingly ripped straight from Amazon Prime.
Right.
But they stripped out the audio, totally changed the title to Sweat for the Win, and then just plastered a North Korean company logo over the original branding.
Unbelievable.
And there's also a game that literally boots up with the stolen Delta Airlines logo. Like, they didn't even try to hide it.
It's because they're creating a simulacrum of the modern world. It provides the tactile convenience of a digital device, right? You get to swipe, you get to tap, you play your games, but it perfectly insulates the user from the actual outside world.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if every time you wanted to add a channel to your TV or download a new mobile game, you had to physically carry your device to a government office for their stamp of approval. It's like being given a sandbox to play in. But the government has individually painted every single grain of sand.
That's a great way to put it. And that painted sand analogy really holds up when we look at how the device monitors your daily behavior, too.
Right.
Because controlling the perimeter, like what apps you can install, that's really only the first step. The real manipulation happens when you open a note-taking app or a messaging service and you actually start typing.
Which brings us to the ideological autocorrect. And I got to say, this part of the research gave me chills. It's not just a filter that blocks a text message from sending. The software actively weaponizes the language you're allowed to use.
What's fascinating here is how the operating system intercepts those keystrokes at the kernel level. This happens long before the text ever even reaches the application you're typing in.
Right. Let's use the example from the daily NK reports because it's so clear. Say you're trying to type the word oppa. Now, for anyone familiar with South Korean culture or, K-dramas, oppa is a super common term.
Very common, yeah.
It literally translates to older brother, but it's widely used as an affectionate term for an older male friend or a boyfriend. But if you try to type oppa on a North Korean smartphone, the keyboard forcefully autocorrects the word to comrade.
And it doesn't just change the word quietly either. The operating system actively interrupts your workflow. It flashes this stern pop-up warning on the screen stating, "This word can only be used to refer to siblings."
A pop-up warning from your phone's operating system just for using slang. And it escalates from there. Like, if you try to type South Korea or the traditional term Namhan, the phone instantly overrides your input. It changes the text to Puppet state.
Or it just turns your text into a string of asterisks.
Exactly. You literally cannot formulate the concept of South Korea as a legitimate nation on these devices. The phone simply won't let the pixels form the words.
And, on the other side of that coin is the digital enforcement of the state's cult of personality. The researchers found that simply typing the name Kim Jong-un triggers a completely different subroutine.
Right, the formatting thing.
Yeah, the text instantly formats into a bold, slightly larger font. It literally demands visual reverence on the screen automatically, regardless of what app you are using.
It's forcing respect through code. But, okay, here's the thing that really bothers me about this whole setup. If I'm just writing a grocery list, or maybe just a private thought in a local notes app, like something I have no intention of ever sharing or putting on a network, does it still do this?
It absolutely does. The interception is not network dependent at all. It is baked deeply into the local keyboard driver. This is real-time psychological conditioning.
Wow.
The device actively overwrites the user's reality in the most private moments. The regime views South Korean culture and external influence as massive subversive threats. So the language of that culture is essentially criminalized at the keystroke level.
But, rewriting text is one thing, right? Because the user is actively engaging with the device they're typing. But how does the state monitor the silence?
Right.
Like, what happens when someone is just passively reading a PDF or looking at a photo or just staring at a menu? We really need to dive into Trace Viewer.
Yeah, Trace Viewer is arguably the most invasive piece of software buried inside these modified Android systems and their custom Red Star OS. It's a background process that just runs silently, and its sole purpose is to take a screenshot of whatever is on the screen at randomized intervals, usually roughly every 5 to 7 minutes.
Every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
A permanent, unavoidable screenshot of whatever you're doing.
And those images are not stored in your standard photo gallery where you could just delete them. They are locked away in hidden, highly encrypted partitions on the device's storage.
So the user can't even see what's being captured.
No, the user cannot view them, they cannot delete them, they can't even access the folder. Only state officials, using specialized extraction software, can retrieve and review those images. They literally track every article read, every menu scrolled, every single message received.
Okay, I'm stuck on one detail here. If these phones run on a modified version of Android, and the hardware is essentially just budget consumer tech from China or wherever, why can't a tech-savvy users just plug the phone into a computer, root the device, and wipe TraceViewer right off the partition?
Well, that is exactly what citizens tried to do in the early days of these devices.
Really?
Yeah, people are smart. But the state responded by implementing a highly sophisticated digital signature system. They utilize asymmetric RSA cryptography to completely lock down the file system.
Okay, for those of us who aren't cryptographers, how does that asymmetric system actually function as a lock?
Sure, think of it as a complex lock and key system, where the key that locks the door is completely different from the key that verifies the door is locked. The government holds the private key. They use this private key along with these software programs named Pigeon or Shame to apply a unique digital signature. It's a cryptographic hash, basically. And they apply it to every single officially approved media file in the entire country.
So it's kind of like an invisible mathematical wax seal.
Precisely. The smartphones in the citizens' hands only hold the public key. The device's operating system uses that public key to just check the wax seal. Furthermore, the customized Android OS constantly scans for watermarks. It is specifically programmed to look for specific EOF or end-of-file bytes.
End-of-file bytes, meaning it's looking past the actual data of the picture or the song.
Exactly. When you open a normal image file, the computer reads the data that makes the pixels red, blue, or green. But the North Korean OS is coded to keep reading past the end of the visual data. It searches the very bottom of the file code for the state's hidden watermark.
Wow.
If you try to open a photo, a song, or a video, the phone's operating system checks for that EOF watermark and it verifies the RSA signature using the public key. And if the hash doesn't perfectly match, the device throws an error message saying, "This is not signed file," and it absolutely refuses to open or play it.
So wait, even if I film a video of my dog on my own phone, and I manage to send it to you somehow?
If you filmed it, your phone creates a temporary localized self-signature just so you can watch your own video.
Okay.
But the very moment you transfer that file to my phone's operating system runs the math. It sees that the file lacks the central government's official signature, and it simply won't open it. This utterly breaks the ability for any kind of viral information sharing.
The level of algorithmic control is just staggering. I mean, if the government intercepts every word you type and screenshots your screen every 5 minutes and cryptographic math decides what media you can even consume, doesn't the phone stop being a communication device and start being like a digital ankle monitor?
That is the grim reality of it. The state has essentially achieved 3 distinct layers of control here.
Right.
At the network layer, they removed the hardware and air-gapped the country from the internet. At the device layer, the OS uses cryptography and those EOF watermarks to automatically paralyze unapproved media. And then at the human layer, those hidden TraceViewer screenshots sit there waiting for random physical inspections by authorities on the street. They have successfully outsourced mass surveillance to the processor of the device itself.
But, you know, with all these kernel-level locks and constant screenshots, you'd think the system is perfectly airtight. But human beings are relentlessly curious, right? No engineering is perfect.
Yeah.
How are people bypassing a system that's literally designed to monitor every single byte? Because the daily and case sources make it very clear that outside information is still penetrating the borders.
It is, but it requires an incredible amount of risk and ingenuity. Because the official smartphones are a cryptographic trap, citizens have to rely on this underground arms race of smuggled microchips and workaround hardware. And the most prominent tool in this resistance is the no-tell.
Oh, the no-tell. Yeah, the research on these was fascinating. For you listening, a no-tell is basically this cheap, portable DVD or EVD player. Has this small fold-out screen. It honestly looks like consumer tech from 20 years ago.
It does, but its power actually lies in its simplicity. Citizens will purchase these cheap SD to USB converters on the black market. They take microSD cards loaded with smuggled South Korean dramas, foreign news broadcasts, or even Wikipedia dumps, put them in the converter, and plug them directly into the Nortel's USB port.
And because the Notel is essentially a dumb device, it doesn't have that RSA public key verifier built into it, right?
Exactly. It lacks the processing power and the customized operating system required to check for EOF bytes or those cryptographic hashes. It just reads the raw video file and plays it.
Wow. And then along the border with China, the tactics shift entirely, right? People are smuggling in actual Chinese smartphones. But how do those even work if the domestic cellular networks are completely locked down?
Well, in the border regions, the cellular signals from Chinese telecom towers literally physically bleed over the river and into North Korean territory.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so citizens use these illegal, smuggled Chinese phones to tap into those foreign networks. And this is how they conduct cross-border business, check black market prices, and, crucially, how they communicate with family members who have defected to South Korea.
But using a foreign device inside a total surveillance state has to be a massive risk. I mean, the daily NK reports detail the extreme paranoia required just to survive doing that. People will walk down the street making fake phone calls on their official state-sanctioned North Korean smartphone.
Right, holding it up to their ear.
Yeah, holding it up to look compliant to anyone watching, while they are secretly checking messages on a hidden Chinese phone cupped in their other hand inside their pocket.
And that paranoia is entirely justified, because the state is actively hunting for these workarounds, and this introduces the enforcement arm of this whole digital panopticon, Group 109.
Group 109. It sounds like a shadow agency from some dystopian thriller movie, but the human rights reports confirm they are very real and heavily mobilized.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the evolution and mandate of Group 109 shows us exactly what the regime fears most. Group 109 is a specialized government strike force dedicated solely to inspecting devices and hunting illicit media. And they don't just look at the photo gallery on your phone. They are highly trained to dig into the system log files.
So they know what to look for.
Oh, absolutely. They look for residual data indicating a file transfer occurred, even if the file itself has already been deleted by the user.
And they don't just look at phones either. The sources note they use radio frequency scanners to actively hunt for the GSM signals emitted by those illicit Chinese cell phones near the border. They even conduct these random, terrifying raids on homes just to check standard AM and FM radios. They physically inspect the dials to ensure they are permanently soldered or locked to the government broadcasting station.
We really need to emphasize the severity of the consequences here, as outlined in the U.S. Korea Institute reports. This is not a situation where a confiscated device just results in a fine.
Right.
Simply possessing a smartphone with a manipulation program, meaning they found evidence you tried to root the OS to bypass TraceViewer or those cryptographic locks, that leads to months, sometimes years, of reform through labor in a penal camp.
And the escalation for media is brutal. The reports document instances where the regime treats the distribution of South Korean media on the exact same level as severe narcotics trafficking.
Yes.
There are corroborated accounts of people being publicly executed simply for listening to and subsequently sharing South Korean pop music and films on hidden SD cards.
The extremity of that punishment reveals the fragility of the regime's control. Their ultimate goal is complete, absolute informational insulation. They recognize that human networks, word-of-mouth communication, and smuggled open-source technology are the single greatest existential threats to their survival.
Yeah.
The smartphone, in almost every other context on Earth, it's an engine for individual empowerment and global connection. But in North Korea, it has been brilliantly, maliciously reverse-engineered into an automated warden.
So what does this all mean? When you step back and look at the aggregate of all these reports and all the technical analyses, you realize it is a dark engineering marvel.
It is.
Not because the hardware is cutting edge. I mean, we know they're using budget components and older forked Android kernels. But it's an anomaly for how perfectly they've subjugated an open source platform. They took the exact same code architecture that runs half the mobile devices on the planet and twisted it into a closed loop prison.
And that leads to a deeply unsettling realization to leave you with today. North Korea's system is uniquely extreme right now. Their isolation is historically unparalleled, But the underlying technology they are utilizing, the automated background screenshots, the cryptographic media blocking, the algorithmic language manipulation, none of that is science fiction.
Right, it's all real.
That technology exists everywhere. The code libraries are already written.
It's just a matter of how the architecture is deployed.
Exactly. What happens if the blueprint of this perfect digital authoritarianism is exported? As our own consumer devices get smarter, more predictive, and more deeply integrated into every waking second of our daily lives, how vulnerable is the rest of the world to this kind of invisible algorithmic control? It is a sobering reminder that technology is entirely agnostic. It only adopts the morality of the system that writes the code.
See you again in the next episode of this podcast.